In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read ancient tomes, the order of the Abercast. We are the brave and bold.
The Ages begins with the shocking story of Cain and Abel and the journey of violence and revenge spanning thousands of years, following Cain through his cursed life from an ancient invasion of malicious angels to the American Revolutionary War. A masterful, compelling journey through time, The Ages delves deep into arcane knowledge, myth, and legend. The art is stunning, and the story takes you on a journey where mortals, immortals, angels, and demons are all forced to deal with the folly that is God's creation. It's a beautifully dark and gritty ride through history. This 4-part story follows the astrological procession of the ages and how each 2,500-year age parallels major changes in the development of Earth's inhabitants. Cain's blasphemous struggle with the divine and sacred tyrant God will create and crumble empires, shape history, and cause a cosmic cataclysm.
And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Ariak, king of Elsar, Kedor Lamar, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, that these made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemember, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. All these were joined together in the vale of Sidom, which is the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Kedor Lamar, and in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year came Kedor Lamar and the kings that were with him, and smote the Riphaims, the Ashtaroth, Karanim, and Zuzims, and Ham, and the Enims, and Shava Kithran, and the Horites, and Mount Seir, and Elpan, which is by the wilderness. And they returned and came to Ismapat, which is Kadesh, and they smote all the country of the Amalekites and the Amorites that dwelt in Hazomtar. And there went out the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, the same as Zoar. And they joined battle with them in the vale of Siddim, with Kedolamar, the king of Elam, and with Tidal, king of nations, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Ariak, king of Elessar, 4 kings against the 5. And the vale of Siddim was full of slime pits. And the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and fell there, and they remained fled to what remained fled to the mountains. And they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and their victuals, and they went their way. And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. And there came one that had escaped and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre, an Amorite, brother of Eshol, and the brother of Aner. And with these were confederate with Abram. And Abram heard that his brother was taken captive. He armed his trained servants, bore in his own house 318, and they pursued them into Dan. And he divided himself against them, he and his servants by night, and they smote them and pursued them to Hoban, which is on the left hand of Damascus. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought again his brother Lot, and his goods, and his women also, and the people. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return of the slaughter of Kedor Lamar, and of the kings that were with him in the valley of Shiva, which is the king's dale. Genesis 14.
The Abracast. Occult. History. Conspiracy. Violence.
Revenge. All right. Welcome to the Abracast. Taking a break from making homemade barbecue sauce. Actually, I've been struggling with barbecue sauce for years. My jihad has been to master barbecue sauce, and I finally fucking did it. I'm canning a bunch of it this weekend. It was crazy, but it gave me time to think, because I recorded the episode, and I had all this kind of time between inking this weekend and doing my barbecue sauce project, that I was like, I kind of started thinking, the last episode was fun. It was all about Nimrod and the Tower of Babel. But the way I ended the episode was sort of mean by teasing this other great story. And I realized that the Vale of Sidam, or the War of the Nine Kings, or they call it the Slaughter of Kedor Lamar, isn't even in the current schedule. So I had no idea when I was going to actually wind up getting up to it, so the tease wouldn't be so fucking stupid. So I thought that I would Shazam out a bonus episode for you guys, sort of finishing up the tale of this rebel king, the king of Babylon, King Nimrod. So obviously, the show is a direct sequel to the last show, episode 70. We're going to get into this. I like to call it World War Zero. But before we get all into it, I want to say thank you so much for tuning in. I love it. Thank you for the success of last month. We just had a fantastic month last month. I thank you guys so much for it. It was really awesome. Also, take a second to encourage you to support the show. You guys know how it's done. You spread the disease. You tell your other weirdo buddies about this podcast that you listen to, about this guy who's babbling about all this stuff, babbling passionately about all these things. You can rate and review it on iTunes. I say it every week, and it never seems to happen. So I'm just going to keep saying it, and hopefully you guys will change your mind at some point. I mean, you're already on iTunes anyways. Just take a second to support the show a little bit. The best way to do it is to pick up some comics. 'Tis the season. Everyone, you're not out at the beach, in these winter months. Pick up some weirdo comic book stories to read. And you will hear all about them throughout the rest of the episode. Let's see. Whoa. Call out to bands. Yeah, if you guys are in a band or you know a band, you're trying to get a little exposure or whatever, I'm looking for new bands to play during the decompression section at the end. I don't know who all sticks in towards the end. But after I do my last little spiel, I try to put on some indie music or whatever to help, calm down after all the reading and my high blood pressure and all that. So, yeah, so call out the bands. Give me, shoot me an email at Towers, T as in Tango, OWERS as in Sierra, 113 at gmail.com. That's the digits 113 at gmail.com. Put something clever in the subject line so I will read it. But yeah, I'm looking for some songs. I'm looking for some bands. Also, everybody, beware. The Mercury retrograde started on Monday. I don't exactly know when I'm gonna pump this episode out. I'm recording it on Monday evening, so if I get it out there soon, just be advised. Mercury is in retrograde. Mercury is indicative of Hermes, the messenger god. So when it's in retrograde, you a lot of fucked up shit happens. Tips. Here's your pro tips for Mercury retrograde. Don't ever argue with your spouse over text messages during a Mercury retrograde. Always reread your business emails before you reply to them. Make sure you didn't hit reply to all when you're just trying to reply to one person. Any kind of thing that makes communications difficult, it will be affected. And I know you're thinking, like, what the fuck are you talking about? This Mercury retrograde. You don't actually believe in this shit. And I'm telling you, after you have someone go, yo, it's in Mercury retrograde, watch your shit, you will find out that you get more arguments with your spouse over stupid miscommunications and shit, and then you're just like, maybe there is something to this. You know, your toilet water doesn't spin backwards or anything like that, but communication difficulties do seem to happen. That's just my experience. I'm just warning everybody about it. Don't enter new contracts. That's another pro tip. Don't go out and buy a fucking car while Mercury's in retrograde, okay? Just do Uncle John a favor. All right, so I always try to put these shows in context, and all the context I'm going to, as far as it relates to the other episodes of the show, this is just a continuation of the last episode. So really everything that I said in that episode, I already put my notes away. I keep them in a box, so one day when I die, someone can find this box and start going through it and realize how much of a lunatic I am. Anyhow, I put the notes away already, so I don't have them, but it's like, I think of the Giant of Kandahar episode, the Book of Job thing where God is fighting the squid monster. And then, so just look to last episode for all that context stuff. We're going to be doing some reading. I already did the cold read was from the Book of Genesis. I don't think we're going to go back there, but we are going to move on to Jasher, chapter 16. And later on, we're going to go back to Jasher, chapter 27. So tonight, my friends, I'm going to tell you the story of World War Zero. Tonight, I'm going to tell you about the fate of King Nimrod, the First World War, and ultimately what happened to Nimrod's underpants. So stay tuned. Right after this, we're gonna kick off. We're gonna get started. I'm just having a good time. I'm happy to be able to do a bonus episode, and there'll still be an episode next week. I just thought it would be fun just to get this out into the world, and I'm just having fun doing it. So anyhow, whenever you can seriously talk about someone's magic underpants, it's just hilarious. So come on, lighten up, dudes, bros, lighten it up. We kind of left this story directly after the scattering of mankind at the Tower of Babel. So quick recap, even though I just told you guys, if you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it. But so Nimrod was the king of this city, and they started building this tower to the heavens because they were going to war with heaven, because heaven did a lot of douchebaggy stuff to them and their ancestors. And God came down and was like, he did some magic words, and all of humankind got divided along this language barrier. my contention, I guess, is that God messed up trying to kill everyone with the flood. So he's forcing this division. He's basically like, well, eventually they'll all kill themselves. So remember, he came down. Remember when he came down to check out the tower, and he was shocked. He basically said that together men could achieve whatever they could put their mind to. Hold on, wait a minute. Where's it at? Genesis 11:5 and 6. He says, and the Lord came to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have one language. And this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. So God was like, we can't let that shit pass. So they scattered, and the men, what they do, the men formed smaller groups, and they scattered, forming cities and states and kingdoms with armies and weapons and soldiers and alliances. Then there formed some kingdoms that were subdued and some kingdoms that ruled over the subdued ones. So I basically have them blocked out in the two like teams or whatever. There's the Mesopotamian King Empire that has the 4 kings, and then the City of the Plains Alliance, which has 5 kings to them. So the first one obviously is Amraphel, which is the king of Shinar, who Jasher tells us is Nimrod. With a different name. And then I went ahead and I pointed out in the last episode that some people also think he's this legendary law-giving king called Hammurabi. And this is the crazy part. Like when you go to like the Capitol Hill, you'll find like a bust or like a bas relief of Hammurabi as one of the great lawgivers, and you're like, man, that dude is linked to Nimrod, which built the Tower of Babel to go fuck God up. Like, what's it? What? All right, so the next one, not getting too bogged into that. The next one is Arioch, king of Elishar. And there's the Kedor Lamar, who is the king of Elam. He seems to be like the big bad of all this, and Tidal, king of nations. And then the City of the Plains Alliance is Bera, who's the king of Sodom, Bersha, who's the king of Gomorrah, Shinab is the king of Admah, Shebember, which is the king of Zeboim, and Zoar, who is the king of Bela. And the cities of the plain. Well, hold on. Now we just did the tail of the tape, so let's get another one of these out of the way, and we'll get to the story proper. All right, so the cities of the plains served and paid taxes to the Mesopotamian king empire for 12 years. And on the 13th year, they stopped paying taxes and they stopped serving them. They were just like, nope, go fuck yourself. We're not doing this anymore. And they're like, yo, they're like grabbing their dicks, and they're like, tax this, motherfucker. The Mesopotamian kings waited. I'm sure there was some sort of diplomacy that was going on and attempted, but to no avail. A year after the cities of the plains rebelled and stopped paying taxes and stopped serving the kings of Mesopotamia, the kings rallied their armies and attacked. They crushed, ravaged, and destroyed a bunch of places that are very difficult to pronounce. If you remember me stumbling through them in the cold open, you'll know what I'm talking about. And the 4 kings and their armies went to the Vale of Siddim. And the 5 kings of the cities of the plains and their armies went into the Vale of Siddim. And they met in battle. This is from Jasher 16. At the time, Kedor Lamar, king of Elam, sent to all neighboring kings, to Nimrod, king of Shinar. See, there it is right there. They forgot to change it. Nimrod, king of Shinar, who was then under his power, and to Tidal, king of Goim, and Arioch, king of Elazar, with whom he made a covenant, saying, come up to me, and assist me, and we may smite all the towns of Sodom and its inhabitants, for they have rebelled against me these 13 years. And these 4 kings went up with all their camps, about 800,000 men. And they went as they were, and they smote every man they found in their road. And the kings, and the 5 kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemember, king of Zeboim, Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, and Bel, king of Zoar, went out to meet them, and they all joined together in the valley of Siddim. And these 9 kings made war in the valley of Siddim, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah were smitten before the kings of Elam. And the valley of Siddim was full of lime pits, and the kings of Elam pursued the kings of Sodom. And the kings of Sodom with their camps fled and fell into the lime pits. And all our remained went into the mountains for safety. And the 5 kings of Elam came after them and pursued them to the gates of Sodom. And they took all that there was in Sodom. So Sodom and Gomorrah fell, and the kings crushed these now infamous cities and plundered and took prisoners. One of the prisoners they took was Lot, who the nephew of the mighty Hebrew Abram. Hey, hold on, wait a minute. I'm just going to go back to my cold open real quick. Let me see here. They Genesis 14:12. They took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom. Now watch this. Chapter 14. This is 2 verses later, and then when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants born to his own house. So this Bible is so messed up. They can't even take the relation to Abram, Lot's relation to Abram. They can't even keep it consistent between 3 verses. Well, how do you like that? It's your infallible book right there. Oh, God, where was I? They took Lot, the nephew of the mighty Hebrew Abram. We're going to pick back up at Jasher 16. Oh, here we go. And they plundered all the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And they also took Lot, Abram's brother's son, and his property, and seized all the goods from the city of Sodom. And they went away. And Eunuch, Abram's servant, who was in the battle, saw this, and told Abram all that the kings had done to the cities of Sodom, and that Lot was taken captive by him. And Abram heard this, and rose up with about 318 men that were with him. And he that night pursued these kings and smote them. And they all fell before Abram and his men. And there was none remaining but the 4 kings who fled. And they went down each his own road. And Abram recovered all the property from Sodom. And he also recovered Lot and his property, his wives and little ones, and all that belonged to him, so that Lot lacked nothing. And when he returned from smiting these kings, he and his men passed the valley of Siddim, where the kings had made war together. And Bera, king of Sodom, and the rest of his men were there, went out from the lime pits unto which they had fallen to meet Abram and his men. And, oh boy, Adonzedek, king of Jerusalem, the same was Shem, went out with his men to meet Abram and his people with bread and wine, and they remained together in the valley of Melech. And Adonzedek blessed Abram, and Abram gave him 1/10 of all that he had brought from the spoil of his enemies, for Adonziach was a priest before God. And all the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah who were there with their servants approached Abram and begged him to return them their servants whom he had made captive, and to take unto himself all the property. And Abram answered the kings of Sodom, saying, As the Lord liveth, who created heaven and earth, and who redeemed my soul from all affliction, and who delivered me this day from my enemies, and gave them unto my hand, I will not take anything belonging to you, that you may not boast tomorrow, saying, Abram became rich from our property that he saved. For the Lord my God, whom I trust, said unto me, Thou shalt lack for nothing, for I will bless thee in all thy works of thy hands. And now, therefore, behold, here is all the belongings to you. Take it and go. As the Lord liveth, I will not take from you a living soul, down to a shoe tie or a thread, expecting the expanse of the food for those who went out to do battle with me, as also the proportions of the men who went with me, Anar, Eshcol, Mamre, and their men, as well as those also who had remained to watch the baggage as they take their portion of the spoil. And the kings of Sodom gave Abram according to all that he had said. Then they pressed him to take of whatever he chose, but he would not. And he said, he sent away the kings of Sodom and the remainder of their men, and he gave them orders about Lot. And they went to their respective places. And Lot, his brother's son, he also sent away with his property, and he went with them. And Lot returned home to Sodom, and Abram and his people returned to their homes in the place of Mamre, which is in Hebron. So it came to pass that the war ended. Abram would go on to make a covenant with God, and due to an affair of sorts that he had with his Egyptian servant Hagar, and a hillbilly-like marriage to his half-sister Sarah, he will go on to be the patriarch of 3 major religions. He will continue this weird sort of soap opera-like plot twist of these Old Testament patriarchs blessing his younger sons, which sort of started with Adam and Seth, went on to Noah and Ham, Ham and Cush, Cush to Nimrod, Abraham to Jacob, and then Jacob, or more appropriately or more correctly, Jacob wrestled an angel and got renamed to the name Israel after he got his hip popped out. So, like in my brain, he wrestles this angel, and this angel gets him in like a Boston Crab, and like he doesn't tap out. He doesn't tap out. Instead, he gets hurt. And the angel's like, "All right, bro. Well, I'm going to rename you Israel, which means I struggled with God and survived, or some shit like that." So he changes his name. So it goes Abraham to Jacob, and then Jacob changes his name to Israel, and Israel does this weird plot twist blessing to Ephraim. So that leads to like the last question about all this, and that's what happened to Nimrod. Jasher gets a little muddy because it tells us that Nimrod changes his name to Amraphel. Then it says that he was one of these kings that Abraham smote in chapter 16, verse 7. So is he dead? And if he is, what happened to his magic long johns? Okay, I feel like I need to kind of brand these magic long john situation. So when Adam and Eve got cast out of the Garden of Eden, God gave them these God wove these garments from skins and gave them to Adam and Eve. And then these skins have been passed down like a lot like the blessing, a lot like this blessing that I was just talking about. It seems like whoever got the blessing got these garments. At least from this one line they were talking about. It went from Ham stole the skins from Noah and gave them to Cush, and then Cush gave them to his son Nimrod, who, when he was 20, put the skins on and automatically seems to become some kind of eternal superhero rebel figure, supervillain. He puts these skins on and becomes like the world's first supervillain. I mean, besides God. God's the world's first supervillain. This guy's like the second supervillain. It's like if these supervillains were fighting each other. So what happened to these skins if if he was one of these kings and got smote? And that's a good question, and we're going to tackle it. We'll get right into this Paul Harvey right after this. So a lot of you guys probably out there don't know who Paul Harvey is, and here's the rest of the story. He would do this thing where he'd set up this. He's like the old. I think they used to call him the dean of talk radio. He would tell a part or an aspect of the story, and then he would go. And then he would take a break, and after his break, he came back and he goes, "Now here's the rest of the story," and he would have like a plot twist or, something that you didn't think about, like while he was telling the first part of the story or something. When I was playing the commercial, I was like, everyone probably thinks I'm talking about Steve Harvey, and I fucked his name up. So I'm talking about Paul Harvey, bro. Anyhow, okay, so here's the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say. This is Jasher, chapter 27. And Esau at the time, after the death of Abraham. Okay, so Esau was the son of Abraham, and Abraham is what Abram's name was after the covenant. After he and God came to this agreement, God switched his name from Abram to Abraham. So Esau was Abraham's son. Okay. And Esau, at that time, after the death of Abraham, frequently went out to the field to hunt. So Esau's pretty much of like an Abel figure. He's like a hunter. He's like sportsman-like. When he's like doing his sacrifices, they're of like burnt meat or burnt animals and stuff. And Esau's brother Jacob is kind of like a Canaanian figure at first, where he's kind of just sits around and fucks his brother over and makes lentil soup and tricks his brother into selling his birthright to him. It's this whole fucking thing. Anyhow, Esau at the time, after the death of Abraham, frequently went into the field to hunt. And Nimrod, the king of Babel, is the same as Amraphel. Also frequently went with his mighty men to hunt in the field and to walk about with his men in the cool of the day. So this is one of those mighty men things where you look at the translation and it's Gabor, which is an actual word for giant. So here we go. Who's Nimrod? Remember the last episode where we talked about this sexual or physical ritual that Nimrod did to kind of start to transform himself into a Gabor or a giant as one of the Nephilim? Oh man, it gets so crazy. I love this shit. And Nimrod was observing Esau in those days, for jealousy was formed in the heart of Nimrod against Esau all the days. And on a certain day, Esau went to the field to hunt and found Nimrod walking in the wilderness with his 2 men. And all his mighty men and his people were with him in the wilderness, but they were removed at a distance from him. And they went from him in different directions to hunt. And Esau concealed himself for Nimrod, and he lurked for him in the wilderness. And Nimrod and his men that were with him did not know him, and Nimrod and his men frequently walked about in the field at the cool of day, and to know where his men were hunting in the field. And Nimrod and his 2 men that were with him came to a place where they were when Esau started suddenly from his lurking place and drew his sword. He hastened and ran to Nimrod and cut off his fucking head. And Esau fought a desperate fight with the 2 men that were with Nimrod. And they called out to him. Esau turned to them and smote them to death with his fucking sword. And all the mighty men of Nimrod who had left him to go to the wilderness heard the cry at a distance, and they knew the voices of those 2 men and ran towards the cause of it. And they found their king and their 2 men were with him lying dead in the wilderness. And when Esau saw the mighty men of Nimrod coming at a distance, he fled and thereby escaped. And Esau took the valuable garments of Nimrod, which Nimrod's father had bequeathed to Nimrod. And with each Nimrod prevailed over the whole land, and he ran and concealed them in his house. And Esau took these garments. These are the magic underpants that I'm talking about. He took these garments and ran to the city on account of Nimrod's men, and he came unto his father's house weary and exhausted from fight, and he was ready to die through grief when he broached his brother Jacob and sat before him. And he said unto his brother Jacob, Behold, I shall die this day, and wherefore then do I want the birthright? And Jacob acted wisely with Esau in this manner. And Esau sold his birthright to Jacob, for it was so brought about by the Lord. And Esau portioned in the cave in the field of Machpelah, which Abraham had brought from the children of Heth in a possession for a burial ground. Esau also sold to Jacob, and Jacob bought all of this from his brother Esau for value given. And Jacob wrote in the whole this in a book, and testified the same, witnessed it, and sealed it. And the book remained in the hands of Jacob. And when Nimrod, the son of Cush, died, his men lifted him up and brought him to consternation and buried him in his city. And all the days that Nimrod lived were 215 years, and he died. And the days that Nimrod reigned upon the people of his land were 185 years, and Nimrod died by the sword of Esau in shame and contempt. And the seed of Abraham caused his death, as he had seen in his dream. And the death of Nimrod, his kingdom became divided, and many divisions in all those parts, and Nimrod reigned over were restored. And the respective kings of this land who recovered after the death of Nimrod, and all the people of all the houses of Nimrod were for a long time enslaved to all the other kings of the land. So finally, Nimrod's dead, and his magic underpants are safe in Esau's hands. Well, the story kind of alludes that they would go into Jacob's hands, which would be Israel. And so one might speculate: did Jacob get the magic underpants? Is that why he was able to wrestle and survive wrestling the angel and not submitting when his leg got injured? I don't know. That's one thing. You know, Jacob also went on to dream about a ladder, getting prophecies from these dreams and visions. So Jacob Israel might have got the underpants. But now, like, what if Esau had 5 sons? And if he were to bless the youngest, who I think his name was Korah. You know, there is a Korah Korah in Exodus that rebels against Moses. I don't think it's the same guy, but I mean, who knows? Like, he rebels against Moses, and he actually winds up getting killed with a fucking fireball from heaven. God fireballs him from heaven. I don't think it's the same guy, but it's a juicy detail, right? Like, what if these magical garments give you superpowers or something, and the people wield their powers for good, but sometimes it makes you like be a crazy rebel against God. So Jacob having the magic underpants is pretty cool, and I didn't really ever come across that till just now. This thing is pretty cool too. This second Korah, the one who rebels against Moses, he also mouths off in the Quran about getting all his wealth and power and stuff from knowledge and understanding and not through gifts of Allah. He says the Quran says in Al-Qasa 28, indeed, Korah was from the people of Moses, but he tyrannized them and gave him treasures, that which keys would be a burden to a body of a strong man. He said, I was only given it because of the knowledge I have. Did he not know that Allah had destroyed before him generations of those who were greater than him in power and greater in accumulation of wealth? But the criminals about their sins will not be asked. So in the Quran, this guy was punished by being swallowed up by the earth with his worldly possessions. So, like, I'm like, okay, well, what if that time gap, like, what if he just never changed his name and he was just wearing these underpants? It was like prolonging his life into like the time of Exodus. It boosts your longevity, your mental acumen, your strength. So I'm like, all right, so where can we go to find these magic underpants? Who knows what Jacob would have done with them? But this guy, if this guy had them, I can imagine like an archaeological dig or like a, treasure hunter or something finding, this guy's castle or whatever, swallowed up by the desert, going through. You can find his body wearing these magical underpants. They were missing for ages. They're found by some, like I said, archaeologist or treasure hunter. And there you go. There you go, everyone. Let's look into my creative process. The comic book I'll never get around to writing, but there you go. You can have it. All right, so thanks again for the record-breaking month. I hope you guys dig the bonus episode about the Magic Underpants, World War Z, Nimrod, and the Tower of Babel. Sorry, it sort of fell off the rails there at the end. Support the show, rate and review on iTunes, please. Please, dear God. Dear Lord Jesus Christ, I pray that some of the listeners will rate and review me on iTunes this week. In Christ's name, I pray. Spread the disease. Tell your other weirdos about the show. Babble passionately about something. And also buy some books. That's the best way to support the show, because it helps me pay for stuff. And it also helps me rationalize and justify taking time to record every week instead of inking like I should be doing. Write something, draw something, record something. Remember, there's a call out to bands if you guys want to submit some music to play during the decompression section of the episodes. Email me at Towers, T as in Tango, OWERS as in Sierra, 113 at gmail.com. I'm looking forward to that, so please, I'll do that as an addendum to my prayer. Dear Holy Heavenly Father, Jesus Christ, who art in heaven, please have the listeners send some music to me for the end of the show. In your blood and Christ's name, I pray. Hallelujah. Check out www.stigmatastudios.com. You can find all my social media links right there. If you go to any of them individually, you don't feel like going to the website, it's usually just Stigmata Studios on whatever platform, Instagram, whatever, society-13.com. If you're wondering what to listen to next, you want to find some fun podcasts that are out there, you can always go to society-13.com. Check out the other shows on the network. They're Homeboys and Girls and Slices. And thank you for tuning into this bonus show. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed talking about it. It's just something about Magic Underpants. I just love it. So there you go. Here, stay tuned or see you next week. Whichever.
Vienna, 1683. Today is September 11th, 1683. The mighty army of the Ottoman Empire, led by the savage and radical terror troops of the Dar al-Harb, surround the walled city of Vienna and begin a siege to break the golden apple of Europe and kill, enslave, or convert all of its inhabitants. The valiant citizens stand against the tyrannical army with the steadfast leadership of Count Ernst Rudiger von Stromberg, the help of the ever-living rebel Cyrus the Dead Guy, and the hopes of the faraway King Jan Sobieski III and his army of flying hussars. The Vienna 1683 comic is available right now from Stigmata Studios at stigmatastudios.com and on indieplanet.us. The Non-Standard Squad, 1944. World War II. 3 weird American soldiers are on a search and rescue mission into the oldest and darkest regions of Europe. A cursed, ever-living warrior, Cyrus the Dead Guy. An experimental warbot, Sergeant Lane McCord. An all-red axe, mysterious rogue with a demon-possessed arm come face to face with an army of magically corrupted machine-obsessed elves, a magic hammer-wielding Norse Ubermensch, and a Nazi wizard who is a member of the ancient Dark Order of the Shining Hexagon. The Non-Standard Squad 1944 comic is available right now from Stigmata Studios at stigmatastudios.com and on indieplanet.us.
a brother know. Back is black, all in, you're gonna win. Bass in your face, not an 8-track. In your face, not an 8-track. What you ought to do, follow for now. Power to the people, y'all. Turn it up. Turn it up. Yeah, y'all, come on. Trust it. Waxes for anthrax. Fuck it.